A little Saturday, November 18th action, week 12, college football DFS here at Stokastic. We're ready to get into it. We got a bunch of games. We got a bunch of players in and out. We got a bunch to get to. That's why we're here. We're ready to do it. We're going to finish this season strong. Only a couple weeks left in the regular season, bowl season. We have got you covered. I'm Ben Rasa. Matt Gajewski joins me as always. We're going to talk about these games. We're going to talk about PrizePicks. We're going to talk about anything else that we want to and what you guys want to in chat. How are you feeling? I actually don't know the answer to this. Normally we get to talk before the show. I was ranting about college basketball. How are you feeling about this slate?
Pretty good. Like this slate. I think it's pretty efficiently priced. So yeah, there's no like screaming values. There's a couple pretty good ones, but nothing you're like terrified to get away from. So I think the slate sets up well today. It should be an exciting one. Some pretty good games for real life action too.
There is, they mercifully spared us some of the SEC 50-point spreads that are out there. A lot of easy games, some cupcake matchups, but a lot of marquee matchups here. And there's so many different ways to play them. We're obviously going to get into, how to structure your tournament lineups, how to structure your cash game lineups. But I would be stupid not to mention for you guys, you see it on the screen, PrizePicks is just another way to get exposure in the college football streets. I've seen the cards for you. You're putting them out there. Talk to the people a little about PrizePicks and just, I saw Bowers was on your card. Or there are a couple plays that people can use with their first match. Again, link below, maybe to get their college football card started today.
Yeah, I like the Brock Bowers over receiving. We already know what kind of player he was. The real question was just what was his role going to be coming off the tightrope? And he had an 83% route share right away. Didn't necessarily lead to a lot of targets, only 4. But I'm really encouraged by the amount of snaps he played and the routes he ran. In more competitive games, that should only rise, and you've got Tennessee on deck. The spread's within 10, so books are expecting Tennessee to push them enough to keep Bowers in the field. I like J. Michael Sturdivant for UCLA. He's had a couple bad games. Those have coincided with Ethan Garbers getting hurt. We've had the Colin Schlee experience. They're now playing USC with Garbers back in action. So your best quarterback's under center. You're playing the USC defense. Over 40.5 yards is the number I took. Took Jacob Cowing over 45.5. Another player who's been banged up and in and out of the lineup lately, but facing the Utah defense. Fafita has been plenty efficient for Jacob Cowing to eclipse this number. We have it a little closer to 56. And last one's Parker Kingston for BYU. They've been so hurt at receiver lately that they've forced some of their ancillary players into full-time roles. A couple of them came back last week, and now they're projected to get another one back in Darius Lassiter. Even before Lassiter returned, Kingston fell below 20% of the routes. Now you're introducing the number one receiver back into the offense. Just don't see any way the routes rise for him. And if anything, I think they could be cut even further. I know the line at 21.5 yards isn't a lot, but we've got it projected around 8.
These are the kind of edges, again, you want to take advantage of it. My man Mike already threw the link in chat. You see it there, link in the description as well. Sign up, get that deposit bonus. Start trying your hands at this. Again, money to be made. And some of these lines are very inefficient. Just another way to get exposure. Shout out to PrizePicks. Let's look at this slate, though. Let's start to get into these games because, again, we got a lot to get to, and some of them won't take long. First game up, though, is a very competitive matchup. ACC, Louisville, who, it is going to be them, is it not, against Florida State the way it's shaping up, and a Miami team that is just gutless. I still think they've got all the talent in the world. So from a DFS standpoint, where does this game fall on the priority list for you?
Yeah, I think there's probably like a 90% chance it's Louisville. North Carolina is the only team that's really live. They've got a couple really tough matchups. Louisville, even with a loss here, basically if North Carolina loses today, they're still in. So looking likely that we see Louisville in the conference title game against Florida State. This game's a little tough for DFS with the low total, 46.5. It basically is bounced between -1 on both sides and gone back and forth throughout the week. Not sure where it sits now, but I'm sure it's close to that pick-em mark. There's a couple other games that have low totals like this that I'm less interested in. The reason I kind of like this game a little bit more if you're getting off the board is we have explosive offenses. And Louisville in particular hasn't been tested. They've only played a couple difficult teams all year long. And one of them was against Notre Dame where the Irish just laid a complete egg. So if you're getting off the board with some of these games that are low totals, this is one I think is okay for GPPs. Neither of the quarterbacks runs really at all. So you're reliant on it getting done through the air. Fortunately, the weakness of both defenses is over the top. So a contrarian plumber, his price is pretty rough, especially on DraftKings. Van Dyke, 7.4K, which is a little more palatable. So I would prefer the Van Dyke side if you're getting to a contrarian quarterback. But I think the better plays come in the skill position groups. Jawar Jordan continues to work his way back from a hamstring. I don't anticipate him being very popular, but we've seen him show awesome efficiency against really good defenses. He carved up Notre Dame back to 17 carries last week, which is promising for him. Again, Miami strong up front, but Jawar's done it against competition on this level. And then Thrash. Think he gets back a little closer to 100%, only 4 targets last game. But within the last month, he had a target count of 20 in an individual game. If he were to see that, obviously he'd be a pretty good play at that number. Not much else behind Thrash. They just rotate the rest of their receivers. The Miami side is pretty cheap for the pass catchers. I think Restrepo, Jacoby George, and Colby Young are all pretty efficiently priced. So no one really stands out. One change they did make is they ran a ton of 4 wide last week at the expense of Cam McCormick. So Brashard Smith, he's a 3,400 play you could maybe get to. I would expect something like 4 targets. And the backfield's tricky. It's like Oklahoma, where every single week Cristobal tells us they're all fully healthy, and then like 2 of them sit randomly. And there's been no pattern to it. They've had a different lead back almost every single week. Lately, it's been Mark Fletcher. And reading between the lines, he's a really highly recruited freshman. Probably a guy they want to get in at least more of a look at down the stretch. If you're playing one, it's probably him, but allegedly Parrish and A.J. Allen are going to return today, which I think kind of makes this a really dicey situation to get to. So GPPs only. I think a couple of guys are interesting as one-offs.
So just to tidy it up, obviously it seems like Thrash is going to be the natural attachment to Plummer.
Yes, he's the only guy I would stack.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I mean, I don't think this really matters because I'm sure you're not going to get to a lot of them. So Williams is gone. It's Van Dyke. I mean, is there a third quarterback they could go to, or does that not even factor in for you?
They have a guy named Ja'Curry Brown who's a decent recruit, but I don't think they're going to use him. I guess you never know.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of those, if Van Dyke's struggling that bad, it doesn't matter if he gets the hook. You're probably not getting there anyway. Hopefully Miami gets it done, but it seems like nothing else from this game. Fletcher is interesting, 39 carries in the last 2 games. Maybe it's more crowded in that backfield, but I totally get it. It was only a 46-point total. Let's keep it moving. Now we get to a giant spread in Oklahoma and BYU. It's the Big 12. What can we say? Dylan Gabriel's been on the slate, I'd say the majority of the weeks, and normally you talk about obviously a very, very high ceiling. We certainly saw that last week. This is the standard 8 touchdown game. Where does he fall in the priority rankings this week?
He's really high. I think he's your preferred expensive quarterback. Prefer him straight up to Caleb Williams and Bo Nix. You have the awesome team total. BYU has a non-existent defense, and he runs more than the other signal callers up at the top. Not that they can't do it, but Nix and Caleb Williams just aren't rushing like they have in previous years. Nix by design. Caleb Williams has taken a few more sacks. He just hasn't played with the same sort of game environments he did last year. Whereas Gabriel is having career highs in rushing attempts and designed attempts if you want to isolate those from scrambles and sacks. 57 designed attempts this year, just insane volume on the ground for him compared to previous years. And all that's led to 337 rushing yards on the year. Just flat out amazing floor. And then you combine that with his ceiling, over 300 yards passing per game for Dylan Gabriel. He should be in cash lineups. He's probably the first click I'm making into them. And his receivers are awesome too. They're a little pricey, but I still think they have pretty solid value. I'm getting a lot of them, especially in the Gabriel stacks. Drake Stoops has target counts of 14 and 13 over the last 2 games. We know what he is. He's sort of this non-exciting underneath slot receiver, but that volume is really hard to pass up. If you want more explosiveness, big playability, just look right to Farouk and Anderson. Targets, not quite on the level of Stoops, but these players are out there every single snap. Both of them have route rates north of 90%, so there's a lot of safety with those two. Not really trying to get to anyone else. They don't use a tight end on every single play, so that sort of cannibalizes Stogner. And then the rotational receivers, Freeman and Gibson, just don't play enough, I personally believe.
What about my man Sawchuk? Too busy back there, or is he playable?
He's playable. He's risky. This is probably the number one thing I'm wrestling with right now. I have a lineup set I'm relatively comfortable with, and the thing I'm wrestling with in it is I don't know if I have enough Sawchuk. He's at 10% of my lineups, which might be light. The problem is you've had a different lead back almost every single week. When all 4 are healthy, I can't honestly say or tell you guys to play Sawchuk because they just rotate so much. And it seems whimsical. I mean, I don't know what these decision makers are doing in the backfield, but Sawchuk is coming off a good game. The beat reporters allegedly say he's going to handle the bulk of the work. I would love some confirmation that like Barnes or Marcus Major are still out, but I might end up just bumping him anyway off these beat reporters' speculation. I'm undecided on this. The upside's clear. I mean, they're huge favorites against BYU. You're really just rolling the dice on this Oklahoma coaching staff. If you could guarantee me he had even 15 carries, he would be an awesome play. Just really hard to make that bet right now.
If you do go there, I assume you do not want Gabriel in that lineup.
I don't.
Okay, just to make sure. So good, obviously good exposure on a, we're not breaking any news. They're a 25-point favorite. On the other side of this
one thing I'll say, I'm not going below 10% Sawchuk. I'm running 150. He's going to be at least in 10% of my lineups. I'm debating more. Hopefully that helps you guys. I don't really know. It's a very difficult situation, but I don't want to get buried by him is the point.
Yeah, and that's where it's not always, certainly we talk about this, the concept of fading. You can come in slightly underweight and it's a small position, but he doesn't completely bagel you if you full fade or something like that. I do want to ask you, if say you run Gabriel, QB +2, something like that, are you looking to get someone on the other side, or Roberts and Epps, someone on BYU, or do you not want anything to do with this team?
I don't really want anything to do with them. I actually think some of their pass catchers are pretty talented, but with everybody healthy, I think you're just probably looking at like maximum 60% of routes for all of them, and then debating where the targets go. I mean, I can't even predictably say that. You don't know who's playing quarterback. I don't think it's going to be Slovis. And I mean, if Slovis played, he'd have a lot more interest. It's kind of like Slovis is really efficient passing, maybe not really efficient, but he's semi-efficient passing, can't run. Retzlaff is the opposite. He has decent mobility and his efficiency as a passer is terrible. So if Retzlaff starts, which we don't know, that's going to be pretty ugly for these pass catchers as well. So a lot of risk with them. I think BYU is just going to be an entire fade. The backfield is now a pretty, just disgusting logjam now that LJ Martin's back. Aiden Robbins had a couple big games, but split snaps with Martin. They used Miles Davis a shocking amount, and all that came on pass downs. His route rate was like almost 30%, only one carry. But I mean, if we're going to siphon off targets from Aiden Robbins or LJ Martin in negative game script, you can't play them either.
I assume the answer is probably going to be no, but I do like to ask these questions. If you got confirmation that Retzlaff was getting the start, could you run him naked?
I would probably look elsewhere. It's just an opportunity cost thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Listen, they're 25-point underdogs. I don't see any way this game is competitive. That doesn't mean it can't be good for DFS. Anything else on this spot?
I don't think so. I think that if we get some Sawchuk news, I'll make sure to circle back. But I'm probably going to try to come in at like 15%. I'm rebuilding some stuff now behind the scenes. Just don't want him in like 30%, but don't want to get buried is how I'm approaching this. If you're running one lineup, I probably wouldn't have my day right on this, if that makes sense.
Not cash viable?
I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah. And again, this is where the tool, we're going to talk about how you can access these tools for college football, college basketball. This is the stuff that matters. These little things and the projections and the ownership can make all the difference. Michigan is up next. Their spread's taking money not on their side. It's down to 17.5. They are still a large favorite against Maryland. Listen, we know we're not going to get into, we talked about this over on the Odd Shopper channel, which you could always go check out, me and Matt, about, motivation, trap game, look ahead game, all that nonsense. It's not that it's not real. We just don't know. What do you expect from Michigan, from JJ, from the backs? How good of a spot are they in today?
Yeah, I wasn't going to bet this game, but now I'm on the other side. Michigan just took some of my money. They can name their score, and I don't even know like how much they have to try to cover this spread against Maryland, who's a team I've been fading all year in the Big Ten. As far as DFS goes, this is a decent parallel to the Miami game, except this one's much harder to play because of the way Michigan approaches their offense. They're 132nd in pace. There's only one team slower than them. They have a 40% pass rate, which they're very willing to neuter even further. Last week, they didn't throw a pass in the second half. I think that was more just to embarrass James Franklin because they haven't done that in other games this year. But I mean, that's the problem with JJ McCarthy. He's averaging 21 pass attempts per game. He can run, but they just don't ask him to when they're clobbering teams. So it's kind of like we maybe take a shot on Blake Corum or Donovan Edwards, or you probably just move on. If this game is relatively competitive, Corum's going to push for 20 carries. If it's not, you're probably going to have to live on the efficiency in the 15 to 16 carry range. I'm fine with that as a tournament option. I'm running him in a handful of lineups, but there are other studs that just flat out project better than him. And then I know you love some Roman Wilson. So do I. The guy didn't even get a target last week.
I know. He's so good though.
He is so good. I wish he would have went to a competent offense. I mean, that's probably not the right way to describe it, but one that's just not so willing to take their foot off the gas. But anyway, I mean, if he ever got opportunity, he would be a stud. But the other problem is he's 6.4K. So it's not only are you gambling on him even receiving a target, you're paying for it too.
Yeah. I assume you would rather have those Oklahoma receivers in the same range.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is unfortunate because I think this guy is outstanding. I think you can make an argument he's the best receiver in the country, but you're not going to see that today. Maybe in a couple of weeks, maybe next week, we will see him and Marvin put on a show. Can't wait for it. On the other side, I would assume that you don't want much to do with Maryland against the Michigan defense.
That's correct. I don't think I have actually, you know what? I'm looking right now. I have a few shares of Corey Dykes. He's just the cheapest pass catcher with a consistent role. He actually has a pretty good role. 25 targets over the last 3 games. He was injured earlier this year, so he's priced down because of that. But you're basically looking at similar opportunity, and it's actually been better opportunity over the last 3 games than any of the receivers at a cheaper price. So if you're playing a Maryland guy, it's Dykes. I can't play Tagovailoa at this price, and you can't play a running back in the matchup with the timeshare they currently trot out there.
Yeah, no, that's just not going to work. No doubt about it. All right, we'll keep it moving. This game is honestly not much better. I hate to try to spin it, but you got a 40-point total, a large spread, and Rutgers, I feel like for weeks now, you've just said, nope, not a single player in the pool. Wimsatt is coming off a 7 for 18 for 93 yards, and he rushed for a whopping -2 yards in the 0 points scored last week against Iowa. I assume you think it's going to be more of the same?
Yeah, they just don't have an offense that's really built to play from behind. Wimsatt is fine as a game manager. He doesn't turn the ball over much. But in games like this where they're just overmatched and facing tough defenses that can key in on the run, they're not really live. I think everything is just, do we want to play a Penn State one-off? Their team total is still not great despite being nearly 3 touchdown favorites. I don't think you can play Drew Aller. They did change OCs. I don't know how much that really changes, but it's kind of like, do we play a one-off Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, which I view similarly to the Michigan situation, or Keandre Lambert-Smith? He has very good target numbers, but the efficiency's been pitiful, I think mostly because of Aller. 9.5 targets per game, though, in the last 4. So you want to throw a one-off. I think Keandre Lambert-Smith is the preferred option. Wouldn't hate like a Singleton or Allen, but they're just that, sprinkling in large field tournaments.
And yeah, I mean, it really doesn't go beyond that, does it? You're not getting to the quarterback at all in this game, right?
Correct.
Oh, man. You didn't bet this game either, did you?
I debated Rutgers, but after I called them the 4th best team in the Big Ten and they lost to Iowa, I gotta remain on the Big Ten West betting ban, except I broke that with Northwestern.
I also did bet Northwestern for the people out there. And that feels gross, but I did not bet this game. I really don't think there's much to say. I would rather save this time for questions and things at the end. So we will just keep going. We've got Appalachian State and James Madison. These are teams, I'm sure if we look back, they've been on the slate occasionally, but not as prevalent as maybe some other teams. So I want to talk to you about Aguilar and what you see at the quarterback position. It seems like it's his. He's got some guys on the outside. You can't run against James Madison. That seems impossible. So what are the angles to attack if you want to go to Appalachian State today?
I think they're really good run backs, if that makes sense. I don't hate Aguilar. For the largest of tournaments, I think he's okay. He runs a fair amount, 259 yards. He's pretty efficient as a passer, too. And App State plays relatively fast, averaging 264 yards per game. But App State's also coming off a string of mostly easy games. And now this is probably the most difficult defense they'll face all year. The JMU defense is just absolutely legit. So I'm a little scared of Aguilar. I don't think you can play it back. Nate Noel's back from injury, which has rendered this like a 3-way committee with Kanye Roberts. And then they use some of the really deep backs as pass catchers. But in the pass game, I'm okay with an App State run back. Christian Horn has barely played in the last 2 games, which is sort of solidified opportunity for Caden Robinson. They rotate a bit beyond him, so I think it's Caden Robinson or pass as far as run backs go. But App State not quite as interesting as James Madison. I expect James Madison to be the most owned team on the slate, so there'll be a really, really interesting discussion.
Wow, really? So that is interesting in itself. Again, this is an undefeated team that will never find out how good they really are. Jordan McLeod, we've seen him. Obviously, this guy's got a 100-yard bonus this year on the ground. I'm kind of an outlier, but he can move a little bit. So when you talk about James Madison, you talk about all this exposure. How do you think it comes in the form of stacks, one-offs, who cash viable? Who on James Madison do we need to target?
All right, so they're all going to be owned.
Okay.
I think Jordan McLeod's the most owned signal caller on the slate for a lot of the reasons you mentioned. The game environment's awesome. Total's pretty good. He's mobile. He's been really efficient as a passer, averages 9 yards per pass attempt. All of his receivers are way underpriced. So you've got Reggie Brown, 5.6K. He's averaging 90 yards per game, 9.3 targets per game over the last 4. Elijah Surratt is 100 less than him. He hasn't seen fewer than 9 targets in any of the last 4 games, averaging 10.3 in that span, 85 yards per game. And then they gave you the gift of every single snap player, Phoenix Sproles, being 3.6K. He's not targeted as much as those guys, just 5.5 per game. But I mean, he's 3.6K. What do we really need to do with him to have him hit value? So I mean, all 3 of these receivers should be owned. I think Sproles will be the most under-owned. But yeah, navigate these guys carefully. If you're playing a JMU stack, make sure you build in some other sort of contrarian piece for tournaments. For cash games, I think McLeod should be in your lineup, and I think Surratt's probably the guy you get to. But if you have an extra 100, like you could play Reggie Brown. And then the backfield's a little interesting. Kalen Black has been battling an injury. So I initially thought like Tyson Lawton had just beat him out, but Kalen Black has been banged up lately, which has led to an absolutely awesome role for Tyson Lawton. Not the best beat reporting on JMU, so we don't have an update on the status. I expect Kalen Black to play, but I changed projections this morning, bringing this a little closer to a 50-50 committee with Tyson Lawton still playing with the lead. And he still projects well, and he's coming up in a ton of lineups. Even if you project Kalen Black closer to his previous workload, just know there's an outside chance that Kalen Black is still banged up, and this could be like an 80-20 split. Kalen Black maybe gets a couple carries and sits out the rest of the game. There's a lot of like asymmetrical upside for Tyson Lawton at his price.
Phoenix Sproles. That is a name and a half.
He's a wagon too.
That is awesome. See, we need more of that. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not going to forget. Like if you, at the end of the show, if you say, who do you want? Phoenix Sproles or the other guy? I'll remember. If it's, Joe Williams, I'm like, what team does he play for? Phoenix Sproles. Shout out to him.
It makes my life easy too. Then I don't have to fix things in the back end and projections when guys have the same name.
Yeah. Can you play McLeod and Lawton together?
I would have a lot more interest in that just because you're saving salary doing so. Like I'm just going to use like Penix and Dylan Johnson as an example. If you played them together, you're soaking up so much of your salary, but Lawton's not even 5K. Putting him in your lineup with Jordan McLeod, you don't really spend that much, so they don't have to score as much together. You're going to have other studs around it. So situations like that, I would prefer they're cheap, and that's exactly what we have here.
Moves to the next game. We got Utah and Arizona. So a real good game. Very close. I personally really need Arizona to win the game. One of my favorite bets of the day. I want to ask you about them, but let's start with Utah. Let's get Utah out of the way. We've seen a good amount of them, of course. Cam Rising never came back. It's not the most prolific offense in the world. Kuthie's also not here anymore. What's left for Utah and who stands out?
Bryson Barnes is left. He actually doesn't project as poorly as I thought he would, but still, I think a lot of opportunity costs. He's only averaging 150 pass yards per game. Decent mobility, but nothing crazy. Most of it's coming on scrambles. They don't design a lot for him. I don't think you can play the receivers because of the inefficiency stemming from Barnes. They're also not cheap. The place I'd have the most interest is the backfield, but Jaquindon Jackson, man, like he gets his ankle re-injured every single game. So now we're seeing essentially a 50-50 committee, and then occasionally they throw in the safety, Sion Vaki. Just really hard to play Utah guys. So I have very little exposure. It's like a sprinkling of Jaquindon in my 150 set, but other than that, nothing. Arizona's a lot more interesting.
So yeah, I want to ask about Arizona, and we'll of course get to the signal caller, but one of the interesting decision points is going to be Lamonius Craig versus Phoenix Sproles. I want to ask you that right off the top. If you're looking for a sub 4K receiver, do you have a kind of preference between those two?
I don't know if this is my preferred cheap receiver, but I think they're in play.
Okay.
Lamonius Craig is behind a few other guys. Like I prefer Phoenix Sproles. There'll be a few others we talk about, I think, that are live, but he's right in there if you're stacking this game. I would look to him. And the reason he doesn't project as well is because the total's only 45 points. So, I mean, nobody really like is a slam dunk projection from the game because it's projected to be slow, methodical. I think it could get a little higher up and down than this scoring wise, but yeah, just based on the Vegas total, it's not ideal. But that is kind of the case with Ted McMillan and Cowing too. And I told you I like the Cowing prop earlier.
Yep.
He's still at 46.5 receiving yards or something. It's not like at 7K or nearly 7K, he's a strong value. Ted McMillan's the same way. So just one-offs if you think this game gets out of control in Arizona's favor. Fafita, he doesn't run. He only has 2 rushing yards this year, so he's a bit overpriced for this game environment. The only thing that really stands out is Jonah Coleman being cheap. I still don't think Michael Wiley's healthy. He's tried to play the last 3 games and combined for 6 carries in those 3 contests. Coleman's had a very good role, and he's the clear pass catcher over DJ Williams. The only thing about DJ Williams is he's a bigger back. They use him around the goal line. You're probably looking at 8 carries at 3,200. It's not the worst play, but also just an opportunity cost thing. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, you mentioned those guys on the outside. And we talked about Arizona's running backs a lot last week. It seems like it's a little more of the same. You don't have stacks of this game, really, do you?
No,
it doesn't seem like a good stackable game.
I don't have any Fafita right now in my latest run. Sadly, I love Fafita.
Great player. Just get it done for me, guy. I don't care. You don't need to go crazy. Just win the game in the desert. Shout out, super chat from Ben P. Thanks for everything. Hit for 1,200 2 weeks ago, making lineups before getting to Vegas. There's no better time to win a lot of money before you land in Vegas. They could take that right back, no problem. Favorite player props today. I know you mentioned Bowers and Cowing. I'm going to say Dylan Gabriel over in passing yards. I think he's going to have quite a day. I looked at ETN. I know he's not on the slate. I looked at ETN for Florida, having a little success on the ground today as well, but didn't bet it myself. It's very hard for me to get props down in New York. Do you have any others? I mean, you mentioned Cowing those ones. Are the PrizePicks ones really the ones you think are the most inefficient?
Yeah, I'll highlight those again in case they missed it. Thank you for the super chat. It was J. Michael Sturdivant over 40.5 yards. Bowers over 55.5. Cowing, Jacob Cowing, Arizona over 45.5. BYU's Parker Kingston under 21.5. And I took Aiden Robbins for BYU under his rushing. I can't remember the number. I'm an absolute boomer and write these down in a notebook. And I left it downstairs. So my apologies. I'll go and see some of the other ones I took.
Yeah, certainly. Always, if you want more of that, Matt_Gajewski on Twitter. Rasa DFS, you'll get me walking outside complaining about UTEP basketball. It's a mixed bag on Twitter for me right now, but just trust that process. Anything else on this game?
I don't think so.
All right, we'll keep going. We're perfect. Look at that. We're 6 down and we're halfway through, right on schedule. This is a cool game. North Carolina and Clemson. It's a healthy total. It's pushed to 7.5. So North Carolina's not getting as much love as they were maybe earlier in the week. But Drake May obviously knows what he's doing. He can handle any defense. Is he good enough to put him in play here, or is that just such a premium tag against still Clemson's defense?
I think he's good enough to put them in play. I love Drake May's talent. It's a rematch from the conference championship last year where he struggled mightily. So there's at least that data point to consider. To your point on the pricing, the other studs are going to sort of lap him a little bit just because UNC's team totals around 26 points. You've got the other studs right around 30 or higher than that. But I mean, if this plays above the total, Drake May's a guy you want to consider. 315 yards per game. He runs a fair amount, 276 yards. Very easy to stack. Walker, the expensive player, literally 100% of the routes last game. And Nesbitt has quietly emerged as their wide receiver too. He's like this tight end receiver hybrid. He has 10 targets in the last 2 games. So I like using him quite a bit. And I think the real chalk piece here is going to be Omari and Hampton. Matchup's not good, but I mean, this volume is nuts. 32 carries last game, 9 targets. That's 41 touches. And I mean, this game is going to be competitive. If this game plays to the spread, Omari and Hampton's probably looking at like a 25 to 30 touch game. And he's averaging 123 yards. What I like most in this game environment about him, the pass catching, like the 9 targets, even if he does kind of get stonewalled on the ground, he is outs to getting there, even if Clemson plays to the spread or beyond it. So Hampton, I think, is a very good play. Going to be looking to him a lot, especially on FanDuel. He's cheap over there.
Cash viable.
He's in the conversation. There's a lot of really good backs, especially at the top. Like Ollie's on the slate. We'll talk about him. and a few others, I'm sure.
To that point, I usually ask you this and it slipped my mind. Is there 4 running back potential builds today?
There are cheap QBs a little rough. You get beyond like the, I don't know, Jordan McLeod range, and you start considering guys like Klubnik or Bowman or Garbers. Like you can poke holes in these guys. Running back's a little more secure in this range. Upside, maybe not quite as high, but yeah, I think you can use 4 running back builds.
Speaking of Klubnik, let's talk about it. We got Clemson. I don't know. Maybe he's just not that good. Maybe it's injury related. He's just not moving. He's not really doing anything. Is this a guy, though, that you might look to in some of those builds? And if you do, is it Collins? Is it Brown? What about the Clemson passing attack do we want to target?
I usually fade the Clemson passing attack, and it's particularly scary when they play teams like North Carolina, who get up and down, and Clemson's still favored. So you've got a team total of 33, just ahead of that. There are concerns with Klubnik, though. They go beyond the efficiency. I think you guys have seen him play at this point. You know he's not a great passer. He has been competent on the ground, but he sustained an ankle injury 2 games ago. Nothing that's really keeping him off the field, but he's playing with like a slight brace last game, and then they only gave him 1 designed attempt. He had prior counts of 7, 5, and 4. So I'm just curious how healthy the ankle is for Klubnik. Are they going to have him run, or are they going to just drop him back strictly as a passer? So I think there's a little bit of fragility to the projection towards the negative with Klubnik, which is why he's not one of my favorite signal callers in this range. Talent aside, I think the injury is a little bit of a concern. I still think you can use the pass catchers as one-offs. This Clemson team is remarkably fast considering their talent level on offense. They're 40th in pace. Again, UNC's 11th, so this game could get up and down. They're so hurt at receiver, they've been forced to use Bo Collins, Tyler Brown, and mainly Troy Stellato as their 3 wide receivers. Jake Brenningstool also has really good target volume at the tight end position. I'm okay with these guys as one-offs. I honestly would prefer that rather than using a Klubnik stack. Brenningstool is the best price at 4K combined with his target volume.
In the backfield, you've already mentioned a bunch of running backs, and we've seen kind of a 1-2 punch. I mean, Maffa was getting crazy work, and now obviously Shipley is here. Both of them possibly live for double-digit carries. Is there enough there with the price points being there, or are they unplayable?
I think you can play them. North Carolina's defense is a little stronger up front, but I don't think it scares you. The team total is still really good. I mean, we just saw Phil Maffa run over Notre Dame. It was a better defense than North Carolina, without question. So this group is pretty good up front. The O-line's decent. So, I mean, you could live on efficiency. I'm almost looking at Clemson now like Michigan or Penn State, where you have 2 elite backs. It's just an abundance of riches. The big thing with Clemson compared to those situations is they're cheaper. You don't even have to pay $6K for either. So I have a little more interest in Maffa and Shipley compared to like the Michigan or the Penn State situation, but it's still not going to be something I'm throwing all my chips in on. There's just a little more than sprinklings in the 150 set.
All right, let's keep it going. Speaking of Notre Dame, Wake Forest is on the slate. Big time spread, an ugly game. Obviously, you don't have to be a math major to see that Wake Forest's team total is quite low. It's not Chattanooga level low, which their team total I think is 2.5 today, which is a tough scene, but they're not on the slate. Let's talk about Wake Forest. Let's get them out of the way. The Sam Hartman Bowl. What is going on with Wake Forest here? Is there anything from their side that piques your interest?
No.
Okay. Hot damn. All right. Notre Dame. What kind of attack is this going to be? Because we know they should really control with that defense. Is it Estime in the backfield? Is it Hartman over the top? Is it a combination of both?
Probably mostly Estime. They just neutered their offense so much. Like Hartman is really hard to play. 26 attempts per game. He's efficient, but I mean, he's like, it's almost like Michigan light with JJ McCarthy, where it's like, okay, they really need to be pushed to have the volume even halfway decent for Hartman. It's not going to be that in this game unless we get a miraculous showing out of Wake Forest. I guess one thing we should say about the Wake Forest side, they're benching Mitch Griffiths, which I think is even worse for their team because Mitch Griffiths can run. Michael Kern is his statue. So now when Notre Dame gets pressure, which they're going to, these likely get converted into sacks at a higher frequency. So, I mean, I think this is even worse for Wake Forest. And to spin this over to Notre Dame, I don't really anticipate them pushing this game. So Estime, awesome game, awesome role. Efficiency is solid, but you're probably going to see more Love, Payne, Price forward than we normally do. But I mean, you're also balancing this. If they play to the spread or further beyond that, he probably has something to do with it. Estimate, I think, is the best play in the entire game. I think he's in the cash conversation due to the volume efficiency. However this plays, he should get there regardless. And it's really hard to play anyone else. To touch on the receivers briefly, they're starting to bench like these dusty veterans like Jaden Thomas. He's been banged up for what it's worth. But last game, they used their 2 freshmen on more routes, more than any other pass catchers, Rico Flores and Jaden Greathouse. I still don't really want to bet on the neutered Notre Dame passing attack, but those are the guys. Like Greathouse is 3,400. He had a 70% route share. That was a season high. Still very tough to get to, but at least worth noting.
I assume you have him behind Sproles and Craig and those guys?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I shouldn't be surprised at this, but just clicking into the DraftKings lobby and looking, the most expensive Notre Dame receiver is 4,500.
And he's a backup tight end.
Yeah, it's pretty damn rough, man. Kind of crazy, but I get it. I get it. So not much here. Maybe one of the backs. Yeah, I don't really have anything else in this game. I did not bet it. I'm not going to bet it. Are you betting this?
No.
No.
I hate Notre Dame. Every time I bet them, they lose. Yeah,
I bet them against Louisville. And then in the basketball world, they just turned it on. Suddenly they looked a lot better yesterday than they did 2 days ago. I don't really know what's going on with them.
I bet them against Clemson. That was unbelievable.
Oh yeah, I did that. And I bet the under in that game and just pick 6s from the sky. Just no problem. Anyway, you know what? It's not going to happen today. UCLA and USC rivalry week. This is one of the many games, competitive spread, obviously. Juicy game opportunity here. Pretty damn healthy when you look at the total, of course. What do you think for Chip? Garbers, you mentioned him earlier. Steele, who do you think we should target from UCLA? Or do you not want to target them even against USC's garbage defense?
Apparently, Chip might get fired.
I hear that. I hear him and Jimbo may have a lunch date on the unemployment line. I don't know.
Maybe Jimbo takes the job. I don't know. I hope UCLA goes a different direction with a guy that can actually recruit LA a little bit better. But I mean, as far as this game goes, you should have a ton of interest. Highest total on the board by a pretty wide margin. Both teams are fast. Both teams UCLA is a pretty decent defense. USC is a terrible defense. So to spin this to DFS, I think Ethan Garbers is a pretty decent play at 6,400. If you need a cheap quarterback, he's my favorite. You don't have Colin Schlee. He hasn't been practicing this week, which I think is low-key pretty important. Colin Schlee plays a handful of snaps every game, but he almost has this Taysom Hill-like usage where he comes in high-value situations, and he's like a wildcat quarterback. He takes away rush attempts and stuff. Garbers actually has relatively decent mobility, but when you have Schlee in the picture, they just take away all design stuff for Garbers. So I think the floor is a little higher. And then, I mean, what could raise your floor more than facing the USC defense, who's been carved up by worse quarterbacks? So right away, I have interest in UCLA stacks and a lot of interest too. The receivers are way too cheap. They're priced as if Schlee is starting. Logan Loy is at 4,500. J. Michael Sturdivant is at 39, which is just a laughable price tag. I mean, you can sort of isolate the games lately where Schlee played. Like last game, he had 2 targets. All right, it was a Colin Schlee game. The game prior, 7 targets. I mean, the volume's been good for him when you have a decent quarterback under center. So I'm going to buy low on him in this spot and play him. Last guy to mention, injury dependent, but they've been using Ryan Cragen as their wide receiver 3. That's largely because Cam Brown's been injured. You'll have to watch this, just late news situation, but I don't think Cam Brown's going to play, which should put Ryan Cragen into play at the stone min. So, I mean, you've got guys, all of the 3 main pass catchers are 4,500 or less against USC. You should be interested in this.
Are you interested in paying what you have to pay for Caleb Williams?
Yeah, I think you can do it. It's not that hard. We've talked about 3 or 4 stone min receivers or close to it, and there's a few more we haven't even mentioned. So I don't even think you're looking at lineup constructions where you're completely holding hands with the field. Again, I prefer Gabriel. I would say I prefer Caleb Williams over Nix, just game environment stuff there. But I mean, he's averaging nearly 300 yards. He's somewhat mobile. The big concern here is that UCLA is maybe the best pass rush in the country, so he's going to be under pressure. But yeah, Caleb Williams, you can't really fault anyone for playing him, and this is the kind of slate where he's not that hard to get. To stack him, I think this is pretty easy. I never thought I'd be saying this after last year, but they benched Mario Williams and Dorian Singer. Dorian Singer's second leading receiver in the conference last year, 20% of routes last week. Unreal. But that's helped Taj Washington, Brendan Rice, and the two other guys that have really benefited from these benchings are Zachariah Branch, no discount on him, but Deuce Robinson, their tight end receiving hybrid. His route rate pushed 50% last game. He's 3,300. So, I mean, he's in play near the Stoneman. Just a wild ride for this USC team this year, but they're evaluating their freshmen, mainly being Branch and Deuce. So I think those guys you can play as well.
Is it possible to get Caleb and Gabriel in the same lineup?
Let me look and see. I don't know.
I mean, it's aggressive. Obviously, you're probably punting 2 sub 4K. I was just interested if you explored or would be willing to explore a build like that.
So I don't have any in my 150 set, but I do have a couple Gabriel with Knicks. And I mean, there's really no price difference between Knicks and Williams. So you could do it. Let me look at that lineup. I want to see what it has. I imagine it's double punt.
That would be my guess too.
So it is. Don't want to just give it away, but I guess I'm going to. If I can find it. This is riveting airtime stuff. All right. So it's Gabriel. It's Gabriel Nix. It does have a couple punts. Troy O'Meara, who we haven't talked about yet. Tight end Terrence Ferguson's in it. You get 2 punt running backs. Yeah, the most expensive player outside of QB is Drake Stoops.
Okay, there we go. And yeah, I think a couple 1v1s related to this game, or not even related to this game, but some of them are. Would you rather have on FanDuel Garbers or your boy Plumlee?
Plumlee.
Would you rather have Plumlee or Cook?
Cook.
Okay, there we go. Estime or Hampton for North Carolina?
Estime.
That's close.
Very close. Those are my 2 highest on backs.
Yeah, that's really close. Yeah, I think this is balanced builds. There's no, like, in my opinion, there's no just like plug and play on the slate. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
There's just not injury news that we got to that extent. All right, let's keep it moving. We got Georgia and Tennessee. I don't know. Getting some love. Listen, going into Knoxville is never easy, but Georgia is healthy. I was dead wrong on them last week. I thought that Ole Miss could cause problems. He did for about 5 minutes, but it's just Beck is out of control. Bowers got tightrope ankle surgery. He's good to go. I mean, he's been awesome, and he looked fine last week. How do you see Georgia attacking? Is it just more of the same? And how playable are these guys?
Relatively playable, despite their slow pace. They have a good team total, and they're just so explosive, man. They score quickly. So you do have chances to rack up massive amount of points. Beck is surprisingly more mobile than you think. He has 100 rushing yards, averages 303 through the air. I do not think Tennessee is a good defense. I think they've benefited massively from easy scheduling outside their conference. And I'm surprised, honestly, the line's as close as it is, but that could also help you if you're playing any Georgia guys. You probably need Tennessee to be relatively competent to get a full ceiling out of the Georgia players. Dewan Edwards is expensive. He's one of the worst price-adjusted expensive backs. That's just due to the return of Kendall Milton, who's siphoning off about 40% of the work in the backfield. Bowers, he's really cheap on FanDuel comparatively. DraftKings, I think he's efficiently priced. I don't really think we need to go into Bowers. He's an elite play if you think he's close to fully healthy, which the 83% route share suggests that he is. The 3 main wide receivers on this team are Dominic Lovett, Ladd McConkey, and Ra Thomas. They use Marcus Rosemy-Jackson occasionally as a rotational guy. But last week, I mean, just clobbering Ole Miss. You saw them pull the plug on McConkey early in the game. He came into the year with an injury, so they're just going to do that when games get out of hand. Prior to that, you can look at the competitive spots. McConkey's route rate will easily rise around 75%. So I think he's fine. I like Lovett's price, and even Ra is pretty cheap. So I'm kind of sprinkling all the Georgia guys, still with a preference to Bowers, and my most exposed Georgia players on FanDuel with Bowers himself. Otherwise, it's Beck with really all those guys spread in stacks.
We saw last week, both backs just feast. Both had 2 touchdowns, crazy production, but they're still not getting volume in terms of quantity. Is it more the same, or do you think that Edwards or Milton have worked their way into playable pricing? Because it's starting to deviate. Edwards is 75 and Milton's 58.
Yeah, I think they're both too expensive for their roles.
Okay, fair enough. On the other side, I mean, Georgia, they just have elite depth. They lost a couple pieces and it didn't seem to make a damn difference. Does that render Milton and Squirrel White or whoever's out there for Tennessee unplayable, or are they maybe a run back that you would entertain?
I'm not a Joe Milton guy. This is the toughest matchup they faced all year. Milton does run a fair amount, but their team total is not high. So I'm struggling to play him. The backfield's a three-way committee. I mean, in matchups like this, it's almost impossible. Like, you need positive game script for these guys. And then the only thing that keeps the receivers live is the injuries. Brew McCoy's out for the year. They just lost Dante Thornton. Their top two are Ramel Keaton and Squirrel White. A lot more interest on FanDuel where they're cheaper. But then I'm not even sure who their wide receiver 3 is. It's ebbed and flowed on a game-by-game basis. And if you've been watching these videos for a long time, you know I've been gambling on this Tennessee wide receiver 3 and perpetually choosing the wrong one and losing money. I think Caleb Webb is your best bet, but I also think he splits with Nimrod. So I'm not playing any Tennessee guys on DK, sprinkling on FanDuel.
Well, question, we've talked about some of these guys, sub 4K. Is it Sturdivant? Is it Sproles? If you had the preferred pay down option, do you have one that sticks out?
Sturdivant's my favorite.
Okay, there we go. All right, we got 2 games left. We're going to be just fine. I do want to mention, as I always do, we have all this information, all these tools, all this projections, ownership. It's all powered by the man who's been talking, not me, Mr. Gajewski. He's got it going on here. If you want to see that information for the night slates, for college basketball, which is coming, again, it's all combined in our packages weekly and monthly. The links are below. They're in the description. You want to check it out. If it makes your life a little easier each day, if it helps your RI just a little bit, we really believe it's worth it here at Stokastic to be part of the family, part of the community. Test it out. Again, bowl season is coming up. We've got a lot of football ahead of us, and of course, college basketball as well. Don't forget about college basketball. Love college basketball, but let's talk about Ollie Gordon, who we got not everything right. We talked about on betting you. We had some wins, we had some losses. But one thing we both got right last week was shorting Oklahoma State. You were adamant about that. You talked about on PrizePicks going under on Gordon's prop. That was a laugher. You talked about Owens on the outside, and they were not ready to play in the bounce house. Now they play Houston. Are you looking for a bounce back for Oklahoma State, for Bowman, for Gordon, and how playable are they today?
Yeah, I think it's a good bounce back spot. I mean, of all the things I got right, luckily that was kind of like a high profile one because there was plenty of stuff I got wrong too.
You and me both.
But yeah, I mean, that game got so out of control so quickly for Ollie Gordon. He only had 12 carries. I mean, the guy's averaging 22 touches per game. That's including the weird timeshare they experienced in the beginning of the year. Prior to that, the 12 carry game, 29, 25, 33. This doesn't even include targets. Houston's defense is horrific. So, I mean, nothing close to the UCF matchup we saw last week. You can go right back to Gordon. Only reason he's not like a lock in cash or something like that is you have Hampton and Estime in the same price range, and you can't play all of them. I think Bowman's also excellent for stacking. I wouldn't read too much into last week's game. The guy had 3 interceptions. He only had 2 turnover-worthy plays, which is unreal. The efficiency for him has been pretty decent. And what we really like is the volume. 42nd in pace with a 55% pass rate, also against a non-existent Houston defense. Extremely easy to stack now. They can't aggressively price Presley, Owens, and Leon Johnson enough. Leon Johnson has, 31 targets over the last 3 games. And then Owens has been even better than that. He's coming off games of 15 and 11 targets. They're both still really good plays. Even with the price increasing, it's not increasing fast enough. So love this OK State side. We'll be playing a ton of them.
Do you monitor or do you care if Bray ever returns here?
I don't think he's going to. He's missed 3 straight games, but I don't think he's going to cannibalize these guys at this point. They've been so good. And we did see Blaine Green return last game. He was just a rotational guy.
Anything else on that side, or can we talk? I mean, what's left for Houston? What do we have here? They've been a frustrating team. They're not a good football team. They're not.
I think they are the worst team in this conference. Ooh. If you told me Donovan Smith was going to play every snap, I'd have a lot of interest. I'm going to play him in a portion of lineups because he's mobile, 341 yards, averages 35 attempts per game. He's just been benched in 2 of their last 3 contests. Oklahoma State's defense is also very bad, so this is a lot of shootout potential. So I do want to play some of the Houston guys. I'm going to play some Donovan Smith. I would caution against like going all in or something. Backfield's a 3-way committee, which I don't like. But receiver is also pretty easy to get to. Matthew Golden's hurt. He's allegedly out for the year. So Samuel Brown should be locked in as the 1. Joseph Manjack is a middling price wide receiver 2. And their wide receiver 3 is 3,400 Dalton Carnes. Another guy near the Stoneman that you can play with pretty good confidence.
Yeah, Houston is bad. I don't know if they're as bad as BYU, but they're bad.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot about BYU. BYU might be the worst team over Houston.
BYU is not relevant enough to even be included in the Big 12. No offense to BYU.
They should have a special bowl game for those two.
Yeah, that would be what relegate. Don't even get me started. There obviously should be relegation bowl games, and they would draw crazy numbers, and that would be sick. And you know what? Like, I would watch Sam Houston and UMass battle it out, and I'm sure a lot of people would as well. Let's get to this last game, Oregon and Arizona State. The Civil War is next week with Oregon and Oregon State, and I hope they're both coming off wins. Oregon's definitely going to be coming off a win because Arizona State has no chance to slow them down. But of these quarterbacks, of Penix and Nix and Gabriel and Caleb Williams and all them, where does Nix fall in the priority rankings?
I think he's behind Gabriel and Caleb Williams in the elite tier, but he's still a good play. And I think he is somewhat dependent on getting pushed in the game, but I don't know if that's going to happen here. I honestly kind of think it's unlikely. So out of the big 3, he is my least favorite. As far as stacks go, I mean, it's really just taken one game. Otherwise, like, Troy Franklin's been an absolute monster every single time. But yeah, I'm still worried about the systemic risk. The running backs project well. There's some rumblings out there that Bucky Irving could miss this game. Nothing confirmed at all. But if you want to read between the lines, he did turn an ankle in the second most recent game, aggravated a little bit last week. They're playing in a meaningless game here with the most important game on their schedule next week if they want to make it to a title berth. I don't know anything on this injury information, so just make sure you watch pregame. I still have Bucky in my lineups, but Jordan James would become the best play on the slate if Bucky's out. And unfortunately, we won't get that news till the late window, so have some swap in mind if that's something you plan on doing in your lineups. Otherwise, Gary Bryant's 4,500. I've been riding the Gary Bryant wind sprinting train every single week. The guy just can't earn targets. I'm not doing it again this week, but if you were inclined, he's the cheap Bonix stacking guy. Otherwise, that's about it. The only other thing to say in this whole game is Troy O'Meara is playing for Xavier Gulleroy on Arizona State. Troy O'Meara is 3,100. He's coming off an 8-target game, averaging nearly 6 over the last 4.
Yeah, you're not getting to Bourget, right?
I'm not playing Bourget.
Okay. He had flashes of brilliance for about 5 minutes. He was throwing about 50 passes a game, and now, man, it's not good. It's not a good situation. Obviously, you're not
Bourget.
getting Bourget. You're not getting to Scatibo or whatever his name is.
No, DeCarlos Brooks is supposed to be back. The last time DeCarlos Brooks returned from injury, they just went full 50-50 committee.
Yikes. I just want to reemphasize this. I don't think this is going to happen either. But if Bucky Irving sat, you would absolutely pivot to James as fast as you could on the slate, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure. So be aware of that, people. And again, that's why you want to follow us on Twitter. Make sure that news is up to date. But I really don't think he's going to mix. I think it's more likely they just gear him down.
That's a risk too, though.
Yeah.
If you're playing Bucky Irving, that's also a risk.
It's absolutely a risk. There's no doubt about it. All right, we got about 5 minutes left. We'll be happy to field some questions. I do want to ask, we got a lot of good people in here. If we could pump I know we're going to breeze over 100. Let's see how high we can go with the likes. If you really support the show, it means a lot to us. We would love to keep this stuff free. Have it here for you each and every week here on Stokastic. We want you to like and subscribe. And again, be part of the community. If you want to sign up for things, always in the links to get the best deals, to get the best promos, to get your foot in the door. But just hitting the like button goes a long way for us. It is very, very appreciated. I always like to ask you, how are your lineups looking? It seems like a pretty low drama week right now.
Yep, they are looking pretty good. I came in at 11% Sawchuck for those of you that want. Wait, yep, 11%. Sorry. So I ended up bumping it 1%. I made this huge deal out of it. It almost did nothing, but.
Do you think Marcus Major plays?
He's on the depth chart, but I don't have any idea.
Brooks for Arizona at 4,700 in play, ? Brooks? the Carlos, I assume.
Yeah. Oh, I don't think so. Sorry, I thought you said Arizona. You said Arizona State. My bad.
Oh, no.
I think it's a 50-50 committee and a tough matchup.
All right, let's see. For the cheapies, you definitely mentioned plenty of guys in the threes. I think the two favorite, at least for me, would have been Sproles and Sturdivant, and they're a little higher. Is there anyone in sub 37?
Sproles is 36, right?
Oh, you see, don't society. Yes, Sproles is 36. That would be my guy. I thought he was 38 for some reason.
There was another guy who's 38. There's a million of them.
Interesting. ETN or Sawchuck for a FanDuel tournament?
Sawchuck, I guess.
That's a weird one. Yeah, James Madison is absolutely stackable. They're just it seems like of all the teams, they might grade out the best of every team.
I think so. I think that's accurate.
What else do we got? We got 3,500 and under. Man.
Troy O'Meara. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple guys.
I mean, it does allow you, just to tie it all together. We talked about earlier in the show, Caleb Williams and McLeod, Caleb Williams and Nix, Caleb Williams and Gabriel, or Gabriel and Nix, combinations like that. If you do that, you're definitely going to have, in my opinion, probably one or maybe even two punt wide receivers.
Yeah, and I think that's fine, man. There's a lot of good punt receivers.
Orm or Estime, it would be Estime for me.
Same.
Sproles, Surratt, McLeod stack. I think that's fine.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about Baxter from Texas. I know they're not on this slate. He is a stud freshman. How much work do you think he gets?
A lot, like as much as he can handle.
Okay.
I have no issues with him. I think the matchup shit is overblown. I'm not really worried about it.
Sproles or O'Meara? It'd be Sproles for me.
Same.
Penix or Drake May on FanDuel?
Penix.
Lloyd or I assume that's Lloyd from USC, or Shipley at running back.
Lloyd, tentatively, don't feel great about it.
Yeah. May for GBP. Yeah, I totally get that. Listen, it's not the easiest matchup in the world. You're in Death Valley, but Drake May is fantastic.
He sure is. I love Drake May.
Yeah. I mean, you said over on Betting You, and I'll quote you, that you think Drake May should go number one. Did you not?
I think he should go number one. I think he should be in the Heisman consideration.
Yeah. He's a player. There is no doubt about it. Maffa or Sawchuck, it would be Sawchuck for me.
Same.
Yeah. Best show in the business. We appreciate everybody out there. Tell your friends.
Kind.
Let's very kind. Very kind. We appreciate it. We're going to bounce on out of here, though. Again, we have more content at Stokastic all day. And of course, Thanksgiving's coming up. It's going to be a great week. One of my favorites of the year for both college football and NFL. Stay tuned. We may add some shows. We're working that out behind the scenes. We're going to be busy no matter what. We're going to have you guys covered for all slates. But for me, for Matt, and for all of you guys right before lock here, good luck. Thanks again for tuning in. Shout out to PrizePicks. Shout out to everything. Shout out to Mike Lawrence behind the glass, powering the show as he always does. Great job. Let's cash some tickets, win some money. And when you do, make sure you let us know about it. We want to see these wins. Make sure you guys get the recognition. But until next week, enjoy the games. Enjoy your weekend. Talk to you guys soon.